Hello everyone, and welcome to the Stuff That Growth is Made of. I'm very excited to introduce you to Robert Cujo Teschner, and I'd like to read a brief introduction. Cujo is a retired F-15, F-22 fighter pilot. He is also a former F-15 weapons school instructor, an F-22 squadron commander, senior joint staff officer, and combat veteran. He holds an advanced degree in operational art and science and national security strategy and has extensive experience in tactical planning and execution and organizational leadership. From 2004 to 2006, he served as the U.S. Air Force's expert in post-mission debriefing, the methodology used by high-performing military teams to self-correct and improve continuously. Cujo retired immediately after his promotion to full colonel due to complications from cancer-related care and started an international business consulting practice based in St. Louis, Missouri. His company's name is VMAX Group. VMAX's mission is to teach, inspire, and nurture teams on how to really team, making work more fulfilling and making teams much more effective. He is the author of Debrief to Win, How America's Top Guns Practice Accountable Leadership, and How You Can Too. And I believe you're also the author of two other books as well. And he is classically trained pianist and a violinist. And so many more things. It's like, how did you have time with all of this? But just an impressive background. And within my world, Cujo is top-rated visitor speaker. And we had the honor to have Cujo at my CEO peer advisory group meeting just a few days ago, where we got to participate in his workshop. And, you know, we all left not only in awe of Cujo, but the rest of the day there was this buzz in the room around the topic and the realization that we all need to rethink some of our processes around accountability and around leadership. So just by way of background, but welcome. So glad to have you here, Cujo.
Margaret, it's great to be back with you. Really enjoyed our time together, and I value the experience that we had. You've got a great group, and they're being led incredibly well by you.
Oh, you're sweet. Thank you. So off script, I want to ask you a question. So where did Cujo come from?
Yeah,
Actually, after you left, my team said, where? I said, I have no idea. I got to ask him that.
Good. Yeah, it's a relatively recent phenomenon in the United States Air Force. I'd say post Vietnam, prior to Desert Storm, where call signs became a thing. And so it's actually a formal thing, depending on where you are. And in the F-15, F-22 community where I was, it's a really big formal thing. So it takes about 6 months before you have a naming ceremony. The tribe gets together. They tell stories about you in this naming ceremony. The stories have to be at least 10% true. It's a festive atmosphere. Kind of how you behave influences potentially where the tribe's going to go with this thing. But at the end of the night, typically they whittle it down to two. They give you your choice. You know, what would you prefer? And if you can be wise enough to not try to influence and just say whatever you choose will be best, it's going to turn out great. If you try to influence, it's going to be a bad thing. In the F-15 community, we're not allowed to tell any of the stories that are associated with our call signs. But all I can tell you is
so
that
don't ask. I got it. I'll have to kill you. Okay, got it.
Mm-hmm. But it's one of it was for sure one of the neatest things that's ever happened to me professionally. Personally, it was my tribe saying, you're one of us now, you're fully vested. And it's to the point now where I prefer Cujo over Robert any day of the week. It's part of the professional brand. And for most people, it's that way.
I love that. Well, thank you for sharing that.
Of course.
Yeah, even though I don't really know all the details, but that's very cool. Thank you. So, you know, you spent years in the U.S. Air Force as an expert of this post-mission debriefing, which is really used to, you know, create these high-performing military teams. You know, so would love to hear, you know, what is this, you know, and why is it important?
Yeah. So, one of the things that I've noticed, especially early on when I pivoted into the business world, there's this expectation, military person, very rigid, probably not a free thinker, going to follow orders exactly, and so we have these kind of preconceived notions about what life in that world must be like, and we're kind of hesitant to ever think that maybe there's something in that world that might be relevant to us. What I would share is that probably the most human teams that I've ever been on are the military teams that I was privileged to be on. Probably the most innovative and open, free thinking organizations that I've ever been a part of have been military organizations, driven out of necessity. I mean, the mission is you got to be better than the other team. The other team is always trying to figure out how to be better than you. So you've got to be in this constant learning posture, and you've got to find a way to motivate and inspire your teammates to want to go back into battle the next day, even if we took a hit or a loss today. So it's a very complex human undertaking, and what it does is it's driven us to figure out how to motivate always, how to be positive and optimistic. It's also taught us how to learn really, really well. And so the debrief, this formal structure that we have for post mission analysis in a fighter squadron, is a learning mechanism, a continuous learning mechanism that equips us as a team to learn constantly why it is that we had today's experiences, so we can build on it and we can have better experiences tomorrow.
So, again, you answered, something that we talked about the other day, and I'm sure some of the listeners is, okay, he's in the military life and death decisions, how does this really apply to business? But, you talked a little bit about it that, there's this perception that there's this rigidness, but in fact, it sounds like, you know, this learning environment is this, ongoing learning and changing and becoming better.
We have to learn how to adapt in the moment. We have to learn how to flex in the moment. We have to learn how to innovate in the moment in order to achieve success. And for us, yeah, success might be life or death, but I would argue in the business space, isn't it the same? And you think about how many businesses were crushed in the pandemic, and you think about how many people lost their jobs in the midst of a global pandemic, and the fate there is really it's tough. I mean, we watched neighbors across the street, working for a multi-billion-dollar company, had a golden parachute, seven-figure severance package if he was ever let go, but let go in the midst of a declaration of a national emergency, 2 weeks of pay and benefits, then it all went away, and it was gone in a flash, with kids and whatnot. So anyway, the point is, I think it's a pretty disruptive environment, the business environment is. And the question is, are we equipping ourselves with the ability to learn fast enough to deal with all the disruptions that are out there? What is the mechanism that we have to position us to be able to face disruption with a almost certainty of being able to navigate it effectively and find a way to win? That's what we're seeking. And fortunately for us, the military has figured out how to do that. And if we can go into that world and pull how it is that they do it and bring it into our worlds, I think it's exactly what the business world needs. And we'd be foolish to anticipate smooth sailing, from this point on. I mean,
Yeah.
really, as we look at all the things that are happening across the globe right now, we need to be in a learning posture.
Yeah. No, it's so true. And it, since COVID, the playbook's not the same playbook as it was. So really, most leaders are going without a playbook. You can't go back a few years and say, I'm going to grow this way. I'm going to do things the same way because your customers, the environment, everything's changed. And agility is one of the things that is so important. And what you're talking about is really, you know, being agile and self-correcting and continuously improving.
Bingo. And if you
Yeah.
look at and you study military doctrine, the ambition to be agile goes back centuries. And doctrinally speaking, our military here in the United States is built on a structure that's conducive to agility. It has to be, because the battlefield of the now is so complex. Things are happening so fast. You cannot wait for headquarters to make a decision before you can move. You have to be able to be empowered to make decisions at your level in order to achieve ultimate mission success. And that's kind of the structure, the basis that we're building on when we're taking military approaches and bringing them into the business world. We want to be able to make the right decision the right way at the right time. We want to solve the right problem the right way at the right time. We want to empower our teammates to do all of the above so that we can be responsive and quick. And then we realize that some of the things that we're going to do in that is we're going to work brilliantly. And some of the things that happen there won't. The question is, are we in a posture that allows us to learn so that we can reinforce the good and keep on doing those, and then adjust from the bad, bounce back from that and fix it? And that's where this mysterious thing called the debrief comes into play.
So tell us more. What is this debrief?
Yeah. So this is it's a tool. It's a tactical level tool that high performance military teams use after a mission is done to learn from it. And we have the benefit of having basically broken down all the complexity of war into individual mission sets. And that's allowed us to think about work in terms of mission sets. Each mission has a sense of purpose associated with it, which is a good thing, drives buy-in and commitment. We recognize that there's an implication to not achieving mission success, and so we're going to strive to achieve it. We know that there's objectives associated with our missions, and that's important. We know that we're going to be able to measure whether we did or did not achieve mission success, something that we might say, yeah, that makes sense, but actually very poorly practiced oftentimes in business. And then we build a life cycle around our missions that says, hey, we got a plan so that we can equip ourselves with the ability to do our best on this mission. And then post-mission, our theory is we ought to learn so that we can reinforce the good that took place, and we can maybe shift the things that didn't go well, and we can do them better next time. And in this kind of an approach, this debrief mechanism is a ritualized form of learning that we tend to gravitate towards because we find it to be one of the most important parts of any mission. Learning constantly is so valuable because it allows us to ultimately achieve our very best, to become what it is that we're capable of. And so the debrief is a learning tool post-mission that helps every member of the team to eventually become as strong at whatever it is they do as they can be.
So thank you for that overview. I have tons of questions around that. So I love your view. I know you do assessments with the Vistage groups. You also do with the leaders, and I know, build that into, the work you do with other organizations. So I would imagine you ask a group of leaders and they would say, oh yeah, we do debriefs, right? We do, we ask what went well, what didn't. From your experience and insight, how does that compare to what you're talking about, and where are the gaps?
Yeah, so we talk about a tool. This particular tool has a bunch of components to it. One of the pieces is that we work really hard to get to the proximate truth of what happened. And I would say there's a big deficiency in the business space. We assume as leaders that we know what took place. We have exclusive rights to the relevant facts. And so we're just going to jump to conclusions and assign blame and say this is what needs to be fixed. And that's kind of a poisonous relationship to have with a workforce that's already disengaged. And it actually lowers credibility because oftentimes our perspective of the truth is wrong. So the debrief prevents us from jumping to the incorrect conclusion. It protects us as leaders by allowing us the freedom and space to engage with everybody on the team to get their perspective of what it was that took place that gets us close to the truth. Another piece of a debrief is we're not worried about everything that happened, typically. Not all problems are equally important. And so we're going to identify the one or two things that are really mission critical to us. We're going to assess why did we or did we not achieve them? And that's important. Okay. So every debrief has a focus, a fundamental question we're going to ask. And then that's going to lead into root cause analysis. And we're going to find the substantive answer to our why question through a degree of rigor practiced in a very empathetic way, that says, hey, I'm going to give you credit for the decisions you made, even if they weren't the right decisions, given the context, given the complexity, given all the challenges we had. We're going to talk about it in a way that helps coach and mentor our teammates into a better understanding of what the right answer should have been if we made a bad one, or in a way that says we value what it is that you did because you're the hero here and we needed a hero today, kind of a thing. And we're going to come out of the debrief with a way forward, something that we can be confident in, fact-based, that's going to allow us to have high confidence that tomorrow's mission is going to go better than today. So key features: proximate truth, a focus, root cause analysis, getting to a substantive why, people being coached up on how to do their part better, or being told brilliant job, and something that we can rely on that's going to help tomorrow to go better than today. And what I find is that most of the things that people think are debriefs not only aren't, but they're an epic waste of time. And in fact, I'm on a personal mission, as you know, Margaret, because it's still fresh. I want to eradicate the questions what went well and what didn't from the business lexicon as fast as possible. I think those are the exact worst questions that we can ask ever. They give us a false sense of confidence. They open the door to subjective analysis that may have nothing to do with anything that's relevant. They waste time, and they could, and this is the real danger here. They could mask the fact that we're carrying risk forward because we haven't actually identified the substantive answer to the question that we never asked, which means we could be on the heels of an epic disaster tomorrow, and yet feel like everything's going great. And I think that's just downright wrong. So those questions come from a good spot. People are trying hard. They know instinctively, we've got to learn here. They're the wrong questions to ask. And there's zero structure to it.
Yeah. And there's so many pieces to what you talked about. One of the things that I remember really resonated with me a few days ago, and when you're talking now, is also the debrief. You need to create this environment that it's okay to talk about the mistakes you made. That's what you're looking for. You need that, because you need people to be vulnerable and to be and typically in business, that's we don't, reward is maybe the wrong word, but we don't, maybe we're not as forthcoming in terms of talking about our own mistakes or learning about what really happened there, and people feel punished if they do. So
That's right.
it's really a different culture and environment that you're creating here.
That's exactly right. And one of the things that we don't know in the United States Air Force is how good of a culture we have. In fact, I may have been guilty of this. My peers lamenting, this is blah, and these people don't understand. But one of the things that we do not understand in the United States Air Force across the enterprise is just how blessed we are to have so much psychological safety, which Dr. Timothy Clark defines as an environment of rewarded vulnerability, one that allows us, in fact, the expectation is that we're going to be vulnerable when it counts. Behind closed doors, when we're evaluating how it was that we performed on a mission, the expectation is that we're vulnerable, not when it suits us, not when it serves us, not when it's convenient, but rather when it's the opposite. That's the expectation that we have of one another, because that has to be resident if we're going to learn together, and we want to learn together because we know we have to depend on one another to go out there and win again tomorrow. So, think of psychological safety as eradicating fear from the organization, as Edmondson talks about in her Fearless Organization. And that's what we have to get to create a culture where learning can take place constantly.
Right. And to find the root cause and to make things better, because you're not going to ever be able to do that unless it happens. So this is, I think, a pretty big sea change for business and leaders. What is the leader's role in all of this?
I listened to a podcast interview the other day with former Secretary of State, former retired 4-star General Jim Mattis. Okay, so Marine General, probably fits the bill of discipline, rigid, all these things that we think. And one of the beautiful things that he said was, when I was a leader, I probably spent 15 minutes a day formally leading, and I spent the rest of the time coaching and mentoring. And so what I think it really requires of us as leaders is to recognize the responsibility that we have. If we're going to build a really tight functioning team, that it's not about issuing edicts and expecting people to rise to the occasion and do what they're told, but rather to figure out how to elicit the best from the folks that we're privileged to lead. And that takes much more coaching than it does, edict issuing. And it involves us getting much further involved at the team level in what's going on, who's doing what, how things are taking place, to get an appreciation for the difficulty that our teammates have in making the decisions that they do and the complexity that they're dealing with at the time. And, not being far removed from, but being somehow in on a semi-regular basis where it is that the key decisions are being made. And that's hard. And, it's uncomfortable, I think, for a lot until it's not. But leadership demands so much more than what we probably give it credit for. And then we have to kind of ask ourselves, like what do we as leaders think leadership is? And how does that contrast with what our teammates need from us? And then we also have to recognize this, as if that's not already complex enough. The demands of the teammates that we're privileged to lead are constantly shifting. So like you said, if we haven't changed from the way things were pre-pandemic, then we're way behind. If we're still leading the way that we did back then, we're even further behind.
Yeah.
And we're never going to hit that stasis where it's always the same. Like, leadership is a constantly evolving thing. It's always situational. And we've got to figure out how it is that we're going to rise to the occasion to meet the needs of the now. And interestingly, and it may sound self-serving, but it's also truthful. The debrief is a mechanism that leaders can use to figure out how to lead more effectively in the now. Because it's not just about, and this is a big thing for business leaders to recognize, it's not just about did we win, like did we hit our revenue goals or whatever, but how we did it matters. So you can run your team into the ground achieving your 2024 goals, and you can knock it out of the park, boom, revenue, revenue, revenue. But if the team is so wiped from that experience that they're all figuring out their exit strategies, or worst case, we've done it unethically, then what's the point?
Yeah.
So how we go about doing this, the degree of teamsmanship that we live in the midst, I don't even know if that's a word, but I'm just trying to say that the way that this thing has come together is more important, I would say, than whether or not we achieved what we set out to do for the year.
Yeah. Lots to think about. And then, I think of this continuous learning almost, especially we used to do win-loss reviews, not well, based on everything I learned in this past week. But also it's easier to do it on why you lost than why you won, right? And typically probably people focus on that, but both are really important. But one of the big challenges that I've experienced personally and I've seen others is, how do you embed it? So what is that, what I would say, closed loop process that, okay, you went through a debrief. Here were the things we learned from the discussion, the root cause, whatever. Where does that go so people don't forget about it?
Yeah, good. I'm going to actually, if you allow me, go back to one thing that you just said,
Yeah,
the win-loss report.
Uh-huh.
We have to ask ourselves as well, like when we're evaluating loss, failure, not having achieved the mark, whatever, how much are we still seeking to find the good that took place? Or are we just so laser focused on problem that we miss the bigger picture, that we still had heroic actions that took place, and maybe we were about one or two questions or one or two actions away from a victory here, which if you're so critical and so focused on finding fault, you don't emphasize, and then you wonder why it is that people aren't enthusiastic
Don't want to talk about
trying.
Absolutely.
So that's a big thing, and there's a lot more to that. But to answer your actual question, one of the challenges that we have in the business world is oftentimes we see the day as just a series of tasks. I got this task, I got that task, I got this other task, and tasks can just kind of stack and pile up on top of each other. And where do we embed a learning mechanism when all that we're doing is pumping out task work? One of the things that I believe helps us in the business setting is to figure out what are our missions, tactical missions, small picture missions that allow us to achieve our strategy. And by rethinking work in terms of mission, something with a definable outcome measured by an objective is something that's measurable, achievable, and time constrained. That then equips us with the ability to plan for execution. It also equips us with the ability to learn post-execution, because there's a time frame at which the mission is done. It doesn't just keep on going forever and ever. And that's, I think, the prerequisite to getting into a ritualized system of learning. We've got to identify the missions, and that's hard. Earlier today, my partner, Psych, was leading the very first session for a new Top Gun teamwork cohort. And in this program where we're teaching the skill sets that we're kind of talking about here, he asked the question, how many missions do you have in your business? So just go into the chat room. This thing was done online on Zoom. And one of the responses was 1,000. So his following question was, you have 1,000 missions going on right now? Yeah, give or take was the answer. To which the following question was, how is that even possible? Like, how can anybody keep track of 1,000 simultaneous missions? And for sure, the answer is you can't. It's unmanageable. It's untenable. If anybody thinks that they're doing 1,000 missions right now, they're doing nothing, because they're making zero progress anywhere, and they're probably just falling further and further behind. And that's unsustainable, and it explains why people are burning out. And so it takes some effort to kind of really think through, get rid of all of the task orientation, and figure out what are the actual missions that we conduct here, so that we can not only adopt a life cycle that promotes learning, but so we can also manage the bandwidth that we have and only do those missions which need to be done now to help us in a sequential, logical, prioritized order achieve success over the course of the year. In the military, this prioritization of missions is an obvious thing, like something that we focus on and do all the time, because we know we're limited with how much bandwidth we have. And when we bring that into the business world, it provides us the opportunity to de-stress, and also to tell people how it is that once they've achieved mission success, they've advanced our collective enterprise in a positive way. And so they have a sense of purpose that's tied to this whole thing. And it feeds on itself in addition to giving us the capacity to learn.
Yeah. Wow. Could we spend like the next few hours just talking and going deeper
I'd love
in all
it.
this? Yeah.
I would love it.
So, I know there's a lot of topics that we aren't going to be able to cover. People should read your book at a minimum. But what are just some critical success factors around, to me, this is about accountability. It's around purpose, as you said, a shared outcome. There's so many pieces from a leader's perspective that's so important here. Is there just, a few things that you want to make sure that the audience hears that we maybe didn't cover up to this point? And I know it's probably a hard question to even think about.
No, listen, I have a few things that I think would be really relevant. Number one, accountability is very weaponized. I mean, it is the presumption when we use that term is that somebody's about to be punished. If we're going to have accountability, it's usually tied to the lack of performance on somebody's part. We associate accountability with the fulfillment of individual responsibility. Expectation is people are going to do what they're supposed to, and if they're not doing it, then they're going to be held accountable, we say. And I get it. Makes sense. It's logical. But we have to ask ourselves, is that the best way? The way that we define accountability as a group of former fighter pilots is, it's taking absolute ownership for the outcomes that we as a team achieve. And so we're going to take it and we're going to divorce it of its individual ramifications as being the end all and be all. We're going to add to it the fact that we have an obligation as members of a team to perform as a team. It's not just about me. It's about all of us together. And we're going to take and adopt an ethos that says, and this is equally relevant in every aspect of our community society, like interacting with people in the spiritual domain, in our families, wherever it is that we find pleasure. Like, if one of us fails, we all do. For sure, in a family setting, like if somebody's failing at something, then we all feel that, and it hurts us and it pains us, and so we want to collectively come together to build that family member up. Why would it be any different on a team? And so we're really trying to get to what it takes to become a team. And if we adopt the ethos that says if one of us fails, we all do, then we also have to, when we fail, ask ourselves, how am I complicit? And it's a real shift, because we live in a very much, what's in it for me world right now. It's about me. How do I promote myself? Picture, social media, look at what
Right.
I'm doing, etc. But in a team dynamic, that doesn't help us. If we can get into the world where I'm wondering how I let you down when we together have not achieved mission success, then we've actually gotten into a place that draws people in. Like, that's so unique these days that if you
Yeah.
could ever achieve it, you'd never want to leave it. And I promise you, and I'm speaking now on behalf of my wife and children, we miss our fighter squadron experiences, because we had a true sense of family. We were a very, very strong community. Those people that I flew with, they were my teammates, and we did everything to support one another, both at work and outside of work. And we loved hanging out with each other outside of work because we were so tight. So
Yeah.
if we can get any bit of that Schlitz in our places of work, game-changing moment.
Well, it goes to a shared purpose and values. I mean, it's all tied into that. And absolute is a really strong word. It's your definition.
It is.
That's pretty black and white. No gray there.
It certainly is. But see, then we get to the, to the real, purpose. Like, what is our purpose here? What is our purpose as a team? And it stuns me how few teams have figured that out.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
I'm also complicit. I mean, as a family member, it took me forever to figure out that we probably, as a family, ought to have a sense of purpose. You could say it's kind of maybe implicit, but I think it's one of those that deserves to be spoken openly about, and to be discovered with the rest of your team members. So anyway, in the business world, if we don't have a sense of purpose, it makes sense that people wouldn't be fully engaged. And you look at the state of employee engagement right now, and it says we really desperately need to find our sense of purpose. And so maybe a homework assignment for anybody that's tuning into this podcast is to go back and rewatch Sinek's original TED Talk that's now been downloaded like umpteen billion times. The golden circle concept that he talked about. It makes sense.
Getting
And
to
it
why.
does so
Yeah.
at the team level, not just organizationally. It's not just about the big picture apple, thinking differently. It's about us as a team. What's our purpose?
It as you're talking about this, I think about a conversation we had within our group a few months ago, that how many leadership teams, they're not really a team. They all come in and they have their own functional goals and areas, and they come together maybe, but what is that broader purpose that everyone, is in it together for? And it can't just be that you have to do well in your own area. And typically that's what it is. So, I think that really is something that the audience can really relate to.
Yeah, and I'll also share this just in case you're not, as an audience, familiar with the Air Force core values. There's 3: integrity first, service before self, and excellence in all we do. And the integrity piece, that tracks with most businesses. Excellence, we get that. We're always striving to be excellent. But the service before self piece, when I first had to memorize that as a young cadet at the Air Force Academy, those were words. They were put to the test pretty quickly, though. And while I was going through basic cadet training, it was, and we could some other day talk about stories along these lines. It was emphasized to me as a 17-year-old kid that it wasn't about me any longer, and that my duty and obligation was to support my teammates and to make sure that together we succeeded. If I made all the marks, if I made it through whatever the obstacles were, or did the thing, and nobody else made it, then I was a failure, not a winner. And that was kind of an eye-opening moment for me. And it was a really, really important thing, because it was that core, that service before self piece, that informed everything that we did as a team for the rest of my military career. And it was also the thing that captured my heart. It's the part that I miss so much. And so if
Yeah.
we can find a way to get into that orientation in our places of work, it does change the dynamic fundamentally. And those core values have to be lived. It just can't be something that we have on a wall, that we talk about at the yearly meeting, December or January. We have
Right.
to assess in our constant learning environment, did we win, and did we do it in accordance with who we aim to be, what it is that we suggest to the world our core values are, and if not, truly we failed.
And more and more surveys continue to say people want to feel that purpose, that camaraderie, that they're making a difference. So these things, service before self, and if you can embed some of that, they feel like they're part of something bigger than themselves, and that is going to naturally, be a motivator and a retention strategy at the end of the day.
Now, if I can, because I if I'm listening to this, there's the part of me that goes, okay, this all sounds rainbows and unicorns and buttercups and whatnot. I mean, look, Cujo, in the real world, where those of us that are that live are doing business, everything that you're talking about is pie in the sky, impossible to achieve. I've got a workforce that's barely functioning, and some of the HR implications of doing what you're talking about, would prevent any forward progress. And what I've noticed over the course of the last 3 years in particular is that folks, either out of weak leadership or because they feel like they don't have any other way, are tolerating people staying on the team who aren't living in accordance with core values, who aren't doing the things the right way, but because they're still performing and it's a tough work environment, that's a pass. And what I have to say is that one of the balancing features of everything that we're talking about is that there have to be standards. There have to be standards of performance. There have to be standards of behavior. There has to be standards in terms of how it is that we undertake the tasks that we have, and violations of those standards have to cost us. And so we have to be honest with ourselves and determine where it is that the boundaries are. And we have to be willing as leaders to be able to cut from the team those who cannot operate in accordance with our standards. And that's hard to do until it's done, at which point the rest of the team thanks you for having done what was necessary in order to promote the good of the team. And once those who cannot abide by our behavioral standards or whatever other standards are gone, then the team starts to click, and performance will actually follow with less, because folks then give more, and that's a good thing. Standards have to be there.
Well, it also, when you get people who aren't living up to those standards, when they are gone, it reinforces that these standards are real. These values are real, and we're going to fire someone over it because they're not living to those standards or values. So it's important for so many reasons.
And I don't know of a single high performance team that's absent very clear, defined,
Yeah.
codified standards. And the best part about it is that they are self-enforced. In the high performance team world, you will come in to a mission debrief, and from the very beginning, and our enforcement mechanism for standards violations is you got to pay $5 anytime that you weren't on point with your standards within certain constraints. You put $5 on the table, and that it's a very small price in the big picture to pay, but the pride hit is the part that that really stings. And you don't want to be the person who's doling out a bunch of cash, because it means that you're letting your teammates down, basically.
Right.
And so, but the flip of that is that you're also willing to admit that you've let your teammates down, and you're going to come back and say, I'm going to do my very best to not do this again next time. So it's a great place to grow up and learn in. It's a great standard to have. And the team dynamics there are so special, and you want to have some version of that in the business teams that we've got.
Yeah. So, you have been so generous with your time, not just today, but this whole week, coming to New York and spending it with my group as well as a few others. So I want to be cognizant of your time. Before we close, I'd love for you to share what it is your company does with businesses, and if someone's interested in getting in touch, what's the best way to do that?
I appreciate that, Margaret. Yeah, so our purpose in the world at VMAX Group, my first company, It's to teach and inspire real teamwork so that teams thrive in disruption and keep our economy strong. And we think that's a very, very important purpose. And it's a litmus test against which we measure everything that we do. And what do? We go out there and teach what we lived by way of inspirational keynotes, huge conference keynotes with breakout sessions, book signings, and the whole shebang. We do workshops. We've done years of workshop training, award-winning workshops, half-day, full-day, multi-day retreats, wherever. We travel the globe to make it happen. And then we've got our implementation program called Top Gun Teamwork, currently 14 weeks online. It is a transformative experience that's helping multi-billion-dollar CEOs all the way down through frontline project managers lead more effectively and build teams that win. And if any of that is interesting to anybody that's listening, vmaxgroupllc.com, VMAXGROUPLLC.com. That's our website. We're in the process of rebuilding it, but for right now, it's sufficient. Great way to get in touch with us.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you first of all for your service, both in the military, but also thank you for everything you're doing right now in terms of making a difference to so many, teams and businesses and everything that you're doing. So thank you for that. It's been
Margaret,
such
I'll echo that back.
yeah,
I'll echo that back
yeah.
to you. Thank you for how it is that you're coaching your business leaders to be able to achieve what they're capable of and to lead in disruption. That's a huge thing, and I value what you're doing in the world for sure.
Thank you very much. So, well, we're going to sign off. Cujo, this has been great. This is the stuff that growth is made of. Bye, everyone.